Some of the neatest parts of Africa are those really tiny ones that get tucked into the cracks. Despite Africa being the continent with the most amount of countries, I've only actually touched on it twice. Let us change that. Oh, and check it out, I got a new map added to the wall. Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland, changed its name on the 50th anniversary of independence. It is a very tiny landlocked nation surrounded mostly by South Africa, with a small border that also touches Mozambique. It's comparable in size with the state of New Jersey in the United States, but actually even smaller. For this reason, and the fact that it's kind of surrounded by giants, it tends to get overlooked. They're the last absolute monarchy in Africa, and more precisely a diarchy, which basically means it's ruled by two people, not one. This situation in particular means ruled by the king and his mother, although that might be more traditional than anything. I'm not so sure if that's canon anymore. And despite how small it is, it's actually very biodiverse. It can be broken down to 4 administrative regions, and that's what I think we're going to center this video around today. And this is the nice part about these really tiny regions. You can cover so much of it in such a small amount of time. So with that, let's jump into it. First one we're going to take a look at is known as Eswatini. This is the southernmost of the 4 regions, with Nuangano being its administrative city, which is the country's 4th largest, and the region has a population somewhere in the low 220,000s. Eswatini has a tiny part of the Pongolam Dam, a large lake mostly found in South Africa, and its west to east borders are essentially trapped between the Drakensberg Mountains to the west and the Lebomba mountain range to the east. The Ingwavuma River cuts across much of this region, while the Umkondo snakes through the mountains to the west. Nuangano is situated near the bottom border of the nation, its name literally translating to meeting place, and it's where King Sabuja II met with King George VII of Great Britain in 1947. Founded in 1921, this was originally a farm supply center and is actually the coldest region to this day. That's mostly because of its high veld climate, and that's one of the 4 types of climates that you can find in this nation. Today it's known very well for its Hotel Casino Royale, which also includes barbecue facilities, a pool, tennis courts, playgrounds, and hiking trails surrounding it. And now right where the Umkondo River breaks into South Africa, there's the Mahambud Gorge with trails all over the cliffs and around the river. Here you can find the very rare bald ibis. Eswatini's first church is also located here, built in 1912, many decades after the first Christian missionaries arrived in 1844. It was called the Methodist Wesleyan Mission, which still plays a pivotal role in local Methodist communities there today. The MR9 highway also takes you along what is known as the Grand Valley, a large plateau with lots of small rural communities. Depending on which direction you can go, you can find a lot of grassland and forestry. Now, if we look towards the low-veld part of this, you'll find a town called Laivumija, which sits right along the border with South Africa. Summer drought is pretty common in this area as it has a very arid atmosphere, and the population of this region is only about 2,000 people. And like I said, it might surprise you how different the climate can get in such a small country, but if you take a look at the actual landscape itself, you can see how quickly it'll go from farmland to mountainous. Moving on. Manzini covers the central western portion of Eswatini, and it's administered by the city of the same name, with this region having a population of roughly 300,000. The Ingwampizi River cuts right through it, moving through what is known as the Ingwampizi Wilderness Area, a very mountainous spot. Closer to the border, you also find the MR3 highway, which kind of connects it to the capital. The city itself is actually a bit of a commercial hub for the entire country, with a lot of the industry taking place here. It was originally established as a trading post in 1855, run by the British Colonel Arthur Bremer, and a lot of the town was destroyed in 1902 with what is known as the Anglo-Boer War. A lot of this lies in what is known as the Eswatini Valley, which means place of heaven. Tourism kind of kicked off here because of the panoramic views and the hot springs, and of course there's lots of hotels and restaurants and casinos and all that type of thing here. This lies between what is known as the Lugongo Mountains and the Mijiba Range. For a more scenic area, there's the Malkerns, which is also known for its handicrafts, baskets and candles, and batiks, which is the process of hand dyeing fabrics using wax. And some of the most fertile farmland is found here, making it quite ripe for growing pineapples and sugarcane. The House on Fire is also found here, which is an extremely popular spot. It's heavily reflective of the people's culture, making it a hotspot for weddings, thanks to Malandela's garden, and a lot of musical performances take place here as well. Nearby, you'll also find Matsafa, which is where much of the mentioned industry itself is housed. About 80% of the entire country's manufacture actually takes place here, and most of what doesn't is the more agricultural commodities. Biggest farming settlement in the province would likely be Mulumbinyatsi, which was kicked off in the 1950s when the Usutu Forest was established, also known for its beautiful orchards. Another one might be Mankayani, another important agricultural center that supports the mohair industry. This is found right in the midst of some of these more man-made forests, and there are actually still some chiefdoms that run indigenous tribes right around here. I think we will continue forward with Lebombo. This is the only one that touches Mozambique due to being the easternmost one. It has a population of just over 200,000 and is heavily dominated by the Lumbumbo mountain range administered by the city of Saitki. The name means marrying place, and it was actually named this due to the king's great-grandfather granting admission to the troops to perform marriage ceremonies. A popular spot here would be the main street, where vendors not only bring traditional crafts but also like to talk about Eswatini's history and local culture. In terms of nature, the Muti Muti Reserve is very important to this area, meant to protect a lot of the floral and animal life. There's actually over 300 types of bird species found here, including the trumpeter hornbill, very much an icon. Over 20 kilometers of hiking trails exist here, and obviously that means there are also plenty of places to stop and rest and even lodge. Right by the border of South Africa is actually an archaeological site simply called the Border Cave, which has one of the longest records of its type in southern Africa. Artifacts range from the Middle Stone Age to the Iron Age, with excavations starting in 1934. This is about 100 meters below the Lebombo Mountain's crest, and the variation in weathering is said to be what formed this. The Great Lesotho River shoots through Lebombo, making its way to emptying into the Indian Ocean, and would actually give name to the area's town known as Big Bend. Essentially, it's named that because of the Big Bend that you see in the river that's geographically close to this town. And much of this region is also agriculturally centered, and as the mountain slopes go away, you can actually see these plains all over the place from Big Bend. It's also full of wildlife, with several reserves found in the general vicinity. Roughly 30 kilometers from South Africa's border sits Simunye, a vibrant city with the third largest population in the country. A lot of social and educational training takes root right here. Shenene is a far northern part of the country, which is right near the Sand River Reservoir, an artificial dam, and you'll find that a lot of these dams and man-made wetlands are kind of crucial for the agricultural sector of the country. This one specifically being important for the waterbird population. And lastly, perhaps the most fun one to say, ho-ho. I'm honestly not sure how accurate that pronunciation is, but it's about as close as my English tongue could get. It's the last and most involved region that we're going to talk about. It's the northernmost one with just under 300,000 people, and it hosts not only the nation's capital of Mbambane, but also the royal capital known as Lobamba. Now, depending on the map drawn, some might even say that the latter city is the Manzane province, but it's like kind of right on that border, and based off of my research, I'm going to put it in this category. Sources are always in the description. Looking back at Mbabane, it is situated near the Eswatini Valley, and the Kamati River runs through it, leading right into the Maguga Dam. This is actually the country's biggest reservoir and has the tallest dam at 115 meters. And apparently it's possible to spot hippos here. Going the other direction towards the mountainous west, we'll see the tallest mountain in the country, Mlambe, falling in the Drakensberg range at 1,682 meters. Moving closer to the capital, you will find the Sibibi rock being the largest single rock in Africa and the second largest monolith in the entire world. Coming in over 3,000 feet in height, its granite origins are estimated to be from volcanic activity over 3 billion years ago. Due to the surface, it's not safe to scale it yourself without a guide that knows the safest trails, but reaching the top will allow you to appreciate its sheer size due to it being difficult to see at a good angle from the ground. Raptors and all sorts of birds like to live in the caves at the top. So, Mbabane was named after Chief Mbabane Kunane, founded by Mickey Wells, where the Transvaal to Mozambique route crossed the Mbambane River in 1887. Now, something very important here is the Swazi Plaza shopping center, which is kind of meant to have most of what the citizens are going to need within a good walking distance, and it's apparently one of the easier cities to navigate. You can find Swazi medicine, all sorts of foods and crafts and the likes here. Diarchy Gallery is another pretty important point here, opening in 1982 to showcase Swazi art ranging from pottery, paintings, batiks, and much more. Now looking over at Lubamba, this is actually the judicial center, and like I said, it's right along that border. Both the House of Parliament and the National Museum can be found here, and the royal family lives here. And remember, just because the nation is ruled by a diarchy doesn't mean that elections don't happen on lower levels. Talked about this plenty of times in some of my other videos. The Embo State Palace can be found here, typical for accommodating visitors to the nation, as well as the Samloho National Stadium for our sports fans. For something on the eerier side, there's the Forbes Reef. This is a ghost town that was once built around mining, and nearby Malolocha National Park is said to be some of the oldest mountains in the world. Ingwenya Mine, on the other hand, is allegedly one of the oldest mines on Earth, dating back to the Stone Age, and corresponding town can be found right on the MR3 highway. And fun fact, there's actually something known as Ingwenya glass. It's basically an art form where they take glass and shape it into distinct patterns and designs, typically animals. It's heavily rooted in indigenous customs. Pig's Peak is supposed to be one of the nicest resorts in the entire country, if you're into that sort of thing, for a nature setting less disturbed by humans. It was actually founded in 1884, and some of the most beautiful waterfalls can be found nearby. Before we wrap this up, I want to mention that basically all of these provinces have like so many nature reserves. I know I talked about some of them, but it's another one of those things that I really couldn't simply cover all of them. And the traditional tribal villages will usually sport these really nice thatched houses with these cool looking domes on top. I imagine that there are plenty of tours that one can take around that. Lots of churches, lots of parks, lots of these types of things can be found everywhere. And I think we've hit a good place to stop because I did kind of want this to be a shorter video. With that, I will say my thank you for taking a closer look at this really tiny nation in a really big continent. It's very unique, and these fun little anomalies are some of what I enjoy researching the most. And as usual, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, yada yada yada, the usual. Until next time.